when I'm anxious, then the anxiety is actually sending me a message. This is a fairly familiar idea, even though it's not at all an easy idea to take on if we happen to be anxious at the time, because it's not the kind of thing we want to hear. But nevertheless, we can say that when I'm anxious, the anxiety is giving me a message. The message is that I've gone wrong in a way. I've gone wrong, taken a wrong turn in the sense that I have placed too much reliance and credibility in thought and have neglected all the other aspects of the psyche. So when this happens, the only sense I have of myself is the sense that thought permits. In other words, the only way I can know myself is as the construct that thought has of me. Thought tells me who I am, in other words. Now, this is a position which has an awful lot of innate problems that don't immediately make themselves known to us, but there's a hell of a lot of problems packed in identifying with this simplistic image of who thought says we are. So what I'm trying to say is in the first instance, it's easy because we don't have to work anything out, because we just take what's given to us and work with that. But in the second instance, it doesn't get us anywhere because it isn't who we are. So no matter how easy it is, it's no good. In other words, there is only one way, and that's the way that isn't easy, the way that isn't spelled out for us, the way that isn't simply a matter of following rules. So Kierkegaard uses the word vertigo in connection with anxiety. So what we can say is that when we depart, for whatever reason, from this idea, this habitual, long-standing idea of who we are, so when we depart from that and move a little bit away, we immediately are afflicted by existential vertigo. The dizziness that comes when we are set face to face with freedom. Freedom makes us dizzy in this sense because there's so many possibilities in it, because there's an endless number of possibilities in it. So that's a very, very different ball game from when there's only the one possibility. So when we are who thought says we are, there's only the one possibility, and that is to carry on being that self, and that doesn't change. That's a linearity. That's an ongoing situation. It's like a toy train, a toy clockwork train that's been wound up and put on a track. It'll just carry on and doing the same thing over and over again. So we can say, well, look, isn't it moving? Isn't the toy train shooting along? It is, but it's always being the same thing. It's always doing the same thing. It's a linear thing. There's the appearance of change, but it's always on the tracks, and the tracks are the same. So if you look at the tracks here, at this point, and you look at the tracks further on, it's exactly the same tracks. Nothing ever changes when you're on the tracks. So what I'm trying to say is that that's a simple situation. It's a simplified situation. Life isn't that simple. It's actually a very simple situation, because when I'm identified with the self-concept, I'm living in a world that is the projection of that self-concept. And so there's never any chance of me encountering anything that doesn't agree with the assumptions that I'm sitting on, because I'm living in a world that is made up of those assumptions made manifest. So it's all very neat, and everything just is what it is, and it's all very matter of fact, and there is no big surprise anywhere. There's no hidden depths, which is why there's no vertigo. The vertigo comes about as a result of depth in life. There isn't just the one simplistically spelled out possibility. There's an infinite number of possibilities. That makes us dizzy. So our normal state of affairs is like the water is very shallow. There's no depth, so we can just play and splash around and it's fine, though it'll get boring. It's like a paddling pool. But when we depart from this idea of ourselves, we find ourselves in deep water. Deep water doesn't sound good because it's dangerous. You could drown in it. There could be sharks in it. But the only thing is that that's what life is. Life is deep water. The shallows don't really exist. The shallows are our own creation, our own artificial reality. We get together and we make a paddling pool for ourselves and we paddle about in it. And we kid ourselves we're being heroic or we're being great or responsible or whatever it is. We're avoiding reality. Reality is always deep. It will always induce vertigo, and it will always challenge us in this way. That we don't really enjoy being challenged in this way. We hate it. It's really, really hard work, and it's perplexing, and we don't know what the answer to it is. So it's very, very understandable why we're quite happy to continue being this self-concept that I always thought I was. But at the same time, the vertigo which I have avoided is still there. But now I experience it in a different way. So vertigo, although it's challenging, it isn't a negative thing. It's exciting. It's life. It's a challenge, but it's life. It's alive. We're alive when we're in it. But when we turn our back on that vertigo, when we turn our back on the depth, the actual depth of life, the incomprehensible depths of life, then that vertigo is still there, but it comes at us in a demonic form, we could say. It might sound a bit peculiar to speak in terms of demons, but it's a good metaphor. We're being attacked by this demon and it doesn't stop attacking us. So what that demon is anxiety. Anxiety is refused freedom. It's freedom looking at us upside down. So there's no way that when I'm feeling really anxious, I'm aware of the fact that I'm being presented with an inverted form of freedom, or I'm seeing freedom upside down or backwards. There's no way that I see that. It doesn't look like that at all. Instead, what it looks like is the alarming possibility of lots and lots of bad things that could happen, lots and lots of ways that things could go wrong, lots and lots of potential catastrophes. So that is how I interpret freedom. Freedom for me is the possibility for lots and lots of things to go wrong. I couldn't even keep track of how many ways there are for things to go wrong and how wrong they could go. In fact, my perception of how wrong things could go is kind of infinite. It's like an infinite hole. It's like an infinite pool I could drop into. Only it's perceived in an aversive way. Really, that hole is freedom, but I'm perceiving it as nameless catastrophes. Freedom is a nameless catastrophe, so to speak. Only catastrophe isn't quite the right word, because the catastrophe is only catastrophic from the point of view of the oversimplified, mind-created version of ourselves. So the way we respond to all of these possibilities, all these different ways of things to go wrong, is by narrowing it down. So there's only shutting down that freedom, shutting it down and shutting it down. So there's not so many ways for things to go wrong. And that's just another way of saying that I've created a simplistic universe in which I can control outcomes. So then I'm really happy. I can control outcomes. Freedom's not going to happen. Only I don't say freedom's not going to happen. I say the bad thing's not going to happen. But actually, what I'm guarding against is freedom. And it's only a bad thing from the point of view of us when we are totally committed to shutting down freedom. Obviously, if I'm totally committed, without realizing I'm totally committed, it's like a deep down reflex. Obviously, any manifestations of freedom, any glimpses of it or intimations of it, are going to be extremely unwelcome. And what is going to be welcome is a security of knowing that I can control and predict outcomes. It's a security of knowing that there's a definite way to go about doing things, that there's a definite set of tracks that I can travel along. So what we do in our lives is to shut down freedom. We shut it down as much as we can, nailing up boards all over the place. And then we leave just one little narrow tunnel, and then we say this is the right way. Or we say this is who I am, this is me, this is my belief, this is what I stand for, etc., etc., etc. And all we're doing there is justifying the unfree state, the state in which freedom has been shut down. So this is all very well, and we can shut freedom down, as I was just saying, but when we do, the negative or fearful aspect of freedom comes for us. This is where it gets a tiny bit tricky, because it doesn't always come for us. It's like there's the demon of refused freedom, which has turned into this persecuting demon of anxiety. And there's me happily living my oversimplified life on the basis of who I'm not, on the basis of the game that we're all playing. And then the inverted form of freedom comes for me and worries me like a dog, or like some thing that keeps darting at me and attacking me. But maybe it doesn't. So the tricky thing is that I could just be playing it safe in my comfort zone, in my oversimplified universe, and I could just be left to do it for a while, and there may be no anxiety. I might live to the end of my days without any anxiety. But at the same time, and that's what Kierkegaard would refer to as perdition. It's perdition, because I'm living an inauthentic, oversimplified, boring life, which has the only virtue it has is that it's not frightening and challenging, and that's not a virtue at all, really, even though we insist on seeing it as such. So there is a possibility that anxiety will creep in and spoil the otherwise perfect picture where I feel confident that I can achieve the outcomes that I want to achieve, which gives me that good feeling of security. Straight away we can see that anxiety absolutely ruins this, because even the simplest outcome, I can no longer be sure of attaining it. I'll be racked by doubts. Maybe something will go wrong, means maybe I can't achieve the outcome that I want to achieve. The simplest thing that we could have done a million times now becomes hugely problematic, and I have absolutely no belief in my ability to achieve that outcome. And instead of that belief, I have a very clear and strong and painful awareness of all the ways in which things not just could go wrong, but are very, very likely to go wrong. It's as if the world that I perceive in my anxious way actually loves to go, it can't wait to go wrong. And I know it. It's not a neutral world, it's a threatening world. So in that case, I have potentially avoided perdition, according to Kierkegaard, because even though the message of anxiety doesn't seem like a message, it just seems like a demon, it is a message all the same. And if I were to listen to this message, I could go through the gate of that anxiety to a more authentic life, to a truly authentic life, as Kierkegaard says. That's what Kierkegaard says, that's his thing about anxiety. All the existentialist philosophers kind of said the same thing, in that at the core of our being there's this tremendous uncertainty, angst, absolutely tremendous. But rather than stick around there and see what it's like hanging out in the epicenter of that immense uncertainty and that immense angst, we fly off in all directions, inventing oversimplified realities for ourselves, where everything is very straightforward and there aren't many possibilities. The less possibilities, the better. It's like being a member of a totalitarian state where they've shut all the possibilities down apart from doing what you're told. Or it's like being in the army, or it's like being in any institution. So we love shutting down freedom. It is almost like an insult to say to someone who's suffering from anxiety that the anxiety is a message. Because we can only hear that in a way which is sounds good to us when we've changed our viewpoint. So normally our viewpoint is freedom is bad, even though we don't call it freedom, we call it things going wrong. And security and concreteness is good. So the message itself won't make any sense until we're actually able to shift a little bit from that and stop automatically interpreting freedom as danger or as the threat of something going wrong. So what that means is that it's no good just running up to everyone who's anxious and saying, the anxiety is telling you a good message there, because that's not going to go down very well and it's not going to be very helpful. But at the same time, when we're ripe to hear it, we will hear it. It's the same with everything. You can only hear anything when you're ready and ripe to hear it. It's not the message, really. It's the receptivity to the message. The message is no good without that receptivity. You could stand on the street corner and start giving all these great messages your whole life. It doesn't do any good unless someone else happens to walk past who are ripe and ready to hear it. That's the main thing, being ready, not the message. We'd like to have it all in the message so we can just put it in a pamphlet or a little brochure or something and give it to people, but it's not about the information, it's about being ready. And we get ready when we're cooked, to use Ram Dass's term, putting cookies in the oven or whatever, and it's no good bringing them out till they're cooked. Or we take them out and we realize they're not cooked, we put them back in again. So when we're cooked, we will be ready to hear that message that anxiety is giving us as a helpful thing. So then the question arises, well, what's the cooking process? What do we do to get cooked? And that's really what Ram Dass was saying. What Ram Dass was talking about was suffering, really. Just the suffering of life, the suffering of what happens to us. And suffering in our heads. That's us cooking. It brings us to a point where we can see things. In other words, we learn through pain, not through comfort. We learn through pain, not through being insulated from pain. Wisdom only comes about as a result of suffering, as Aeschylus says. We say we like wisdom, but we don't like suffering, that's for sure. And as a result, we've wangled it, societally speaking, so there is feck all wisdom anywhere, but we're pretty good at managing the suffering to some extent, or controlling it, or staying in control a bit. So we've managed to stay safe in a way, but we're also cheated the natural process of cooking. None of us are cooked, we're not growing. We don't grow as people within this particular society. We can develop technical aspects of ourselves. We can develop certain skills and things and develop them and hothouse them. But as a whole, as an individual, there is no growth within the structure or type of world that society provides us with. Absolutely no growth at all. That's not what it's about. It's about denying the immense freedom that we have and replacing it with the opposite of freedom, which is the toy clockwork train going down a single track. So the thing about the clockwork toy image or metaphor is that when we see the clockwork toy whizzing along the tracks, we can see it's moving. It's like, wow, look at it go, look at it go. It's moving. And we can say it's progressing, and isn't this great? So our whole life could be like that, if it was. But when we really look at the toy train on the track, we realize that despite the illusion of movement, no matter where it is, whether it's here or whether it's further down or further down again, it's only ever on that very same track. So the point here is that our lives, when they're on the basis of this mechanical image of ourselves, that we really don't have any possibilities of questioning, and there is no questioning it. We can only look out and dream, as Jung says. We can only look out on the basis of this standpoint and live the life that is the projection or externalization of this standpoint, which is a complete, that's life defeated. Instead of living, we've crawled up our own arses, so to speak. So in reality, that nothing's happening with that train, nothing's happening with that. And in reality, there's nothing happening with us. When we're adapted to the social world, when we're perceiving ourselves as convention says we should perceive ourselves, then for all the appearance of progress or the appearance of movement, nothing's happening. We're not growing. And so we could say that anxiety is the way that we gain awareness of this state of affairs, which isn't a good state of affairs. There's something wrong here. If we're not growing, we're spending all these years, we're not growing, we're just distracting ourselves. There's something not right about that, because we're here to grow. We're not here to distract ourselves from growing. And so we could say that anxiety is the message that makes it unable for us to carry on living in that oversimplified way. And the only way that we can, in a way, I guess, like Adi Shanti says, anxiety is like checkmated us. It's like checkmate. And it's like, oh God, what can I do? How can I maneuver? Where can I go now? And I can't. I'm checkmated. So we always say the checkmate's a bad thing if you're on the wrong side of it. But in terms of mental health, it isn't a bad thing, because it's only when we're checkmated that we can grow.